The crystal chandeliers of Valentino's spilled golden light across the crisp white tablecloths and gleaming silverware, crafting an atmosphere of old-world elegance that practically shouted exclusivity. This wasn't the kind of place your average Joe would frequent. The restaurant's clientele was a mix of politicians, high-powered business moguls, and those who preferred to operate just outside the boundaries of legitimate society. Tonight, like every Tuesday night for the past 3 months, the corner booth was reserved for a man whose very name could make even the most hardened criminals lower their voices to a mere whisper. Dante Moretti sat with his back to the wall, strategically positioned to survey the entire dining room. At 32, he ruled an empire built on unwavering loyalty, chilling fear, and an iron fist that held sway over half the city's underground operations. His impeccably tailored black suit probably cost more than most people earned in a month, and the Patek Philippe watch adorning his wrist could have easily covered someone's rent for an entire year. His dark hair was slicked back with unwavering precision, and he sported a neatly trimmed stubble beard that only amplified his dangerous aura. His eyes, however, were his most potent weapon, capable of freezing a man's blood with a single piercing glance. Dante Moretti was quite simply power personified. "Mr. Moretti, your usual?" The head waiter approached with practiced deference, though a slight tremor betrayed his professional composure. Dante didn't even bother to look up from his phone. "You know what I want, Antonio." "Of course, sir. Right away." Antonio retreated quickly, an almost palpable sense of relief washing over him. Around the restaurant, conversations continued in hushed tones, but everyone was acutely aware of the man occupying the corner booth. They'd all heard the stories. Families who had the misfortune of crossing the Morettis simply vanished from the city, never to be seen or heard from again. Business owners who dared to refuse his protection found their establishments reduced to smoldering rubble. Though, of course, nothing was ever officially proven. Dante Moretti didn't need to raise his voice or issue direct threats. His reputation preceded him, doing all the dirty work. Sarah Mitchell pushed through the swinging doors of the kitchen, expertly balancing 3 plates with the ease that only comes from years of waiting tables. At 25, she was diligently saving every penny for her final year of nursing school, working double shifts at Valentino's because the tips were significantly better than anywhere else in the city. Her light brown hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, and her red apron remained spotless despite the relentless dinner rush. "Table 7 needs more wine," she told Marco, the sommelier, before heading out into the main dining room. "Sarah, wait." Marco's voice carried a distinct warning note, but she was already gone. She'd noticed the corner booth was occupied again. It was the mysterious man who always sat alone, always ordered the same thing, and always left a tip that was more generous than the bill itself. Sarah had served him twice before, and on both occasions, he'd barely acknowledged her existence beyond a curt nod. She didn't know who he was, and frankly, she didn't care to know. In her world, people were just people, regardless of their bank accounts or social standing. "Here is your osso buco, Mr. Moretti." Antonio placed the dish down with almost reverent care. Chef Michel prepared it personally. Dante's phone buzzed, alerting him to a text message from his consigliere regarding a shipment issue down at the docks. His jaw visibly tightened as he read the details. Someone was stealing from him. Someone was foolish enough to skim off the top and actually think he wouldn't notice. He cut into the veal with more force than necessary, his mind already formulating a plan for how to deal with the situation. The Moretti family had absolutely zero tolerance for theft. They dealt with such problems swiftly and permanently. Sarah approached table 12 with their entrees when she overheard raised voices coming from the corner. She turned to see the man in the expensive suit glaring down at his plate, his expression thunderous. "This is unacceptable." Dante's voice echoed across the suddenly silent restaurant. "I asked for the meat medium rare. This is practically raw." Antonio rushed over, his face paling noticeably. "Mr. Moretti, I apologize profusely. I'll have Chef Michel." "I don't care what Michel does," Dante snapped, pushing the plate away with a visible expression of disgust. "This is incompetence. Pure incompetence." The entire restaurant had come to a standstill. Diners had stopped eating, waiters froze mid-step, and even the piano player's hands hovered hesitantly over the keys. Sarah watched the scene unfold, her jaw tightening with each passing second. She'd seen the plate when Antonio carried it out. The meat had been cooked perfectly. She would have staked her reputation on it. This wasn't about the food at all. This was about a man who was accustomed to everyone cowering at his feet. Before she could stop herself, Sarah began walking toward the corner booth, her bright red apron standing out against the restaurant's muted decor. "Sarah, no." Antonio's whispered warning went unheeded. She stopped beside Dante's table, her blue eyes meeting his dark ones without even a hint of fear. Up close, she could see that he was younger than she'd initially thought, with a face that could have been considered handsome if not for the cold, cruel glint in his eyes. A gold chain glinted against his open collar, and she noticed a subtle tattoo on his wrist. Some sort of family crest, perhaps. "Is there a problem, sir?" Her voice remained calm and professional. Dante looked up at her, genuinely surprised by the interruption. Most people made a point to avoid his gaze altogether. This waitress, this girl with her simple uniform and neat ponytail, was staring directly at him, waiting for an answer. "The problem," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "is that I'm paying for quality and receiving garbage. The meat is cooked exactly as you ordered it," Sarah countered, not breaking eye contact. "I saw it myself before Antonio brought it out." The restaurant collectively held its breath. No one spoke to Dante Moretti this way. Absolutely no one. "Are you telling me I'm wrong?" Dante slowly stood, his 6'3" frame towering over her. Men twice his size had instinctively stepped back from that posture. Grown men who had seen combat had lowered their eyes under that stare. Sarah tilted her head slightly, considering him with an expression that suggested she was analyzing a particularly interesting specimen. Then, she spoke 3 words that would change both of their lives forever. "You don't own me." The silence that followed was absolute and profound. Someone's fork clattered against a china plate, the sound echoing like an explosion in the stillness. Antonio looked like he was about to faint. The other diners stared with a mixture of horror and morbid fascination, bracing themselves for the inevitable eruption that was sure to come. Dante Moretti, the man who controlled an empire through fear, the man who made hardened criminals nervous, found himself speechless. No one had ever spoken to him like this, not in years. Not since he'd built his formidable reputation on the ashes of those who dared to challenge him. And this girl, this waitress with her defiant eyes and unyielding spine, didn't even know who he was. For the first time in a decade, Dante Moretti felt something other than cold calculation. He felt a flicker of fascination. "What's your name?" His voice had softened, losing its sharp, dangerous edge. "Sarah." She didn't add "sir," or show any deference. "And your meat is medium rare, exactly as ordered. But if you'd like it cooked differently, I'd be happy to ask Chef Michel to prepare another plate." The ghost of a smile touched Dante's lips. "That won't be necessary." He sat back down, his eyes never leaving her face. "You're right. The meat is fine." The restaurant seemed to exhale in unison, releasing the collective tension that had gripped it. Sarah nodded once. "Is there anything else you need?" "No." Dante's gaze intensified. "But I'm sure I'll think of something." She turned to walk away, her heart now pounding in her chest as the adrenaline began to subside. What had she just done? Who was this man that the entire restaurant trembled at his presence? "Sarah." His voice stopped her. She turned back to face him. "You work here often?" 5 nights a week." "Good." Something flickered in his eyes, something that looked almost like warmth. "Very good." As Sarah returned to the kitchen, she could feel his gaze following her across the room. Behind the kitchen doors, Marco grabbed her arm, his voice shaking. "Do you have any idea who that is?" "That's Dante Moretti." "The Dante Moretti. He runs half the city's underground. People disappear when they cross him, Sarah. They just vanish." Sarah felt ice water flood her veins. "I didn't know." "Well, now you do." Marco's expression was a mixture of admiration and terror. Either you just committed career suicide or... He shook his head, unable to finish the thought. I don't know what you just did. Back in the dining room, Dante cut into his meat, a genuine smile playing on his lips. In his world, people lied, schemed, and told him only what they thought he wanted to hear. But this girl, this brave, foolish girl, had looked him straight in the eye and refused to back down. His phone buzzed again, reminding him of the problem at the docks, the theft, and the usual business that demanded his immediate attention. But for the first time in years, Dante Moretti's mind was occupied elsewhere. It was focused on a waitress with light brown hair and fearless blue eyes who had dared to utter 3 words that no one else would ever say to his face. You don't own me. No, he thought, watching her move through the restaurant with practiced grace. Not yet. 3 days had passed since the incident at Valentino's, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being constantly watched. She chalked it up to paranoia, fueled by Marco's dire warnings about Dante Moretti. The internet had been of little help. Searching his name only brought up vague mentions in business articles and a few society photos, but nothing concrete, nothing that confirmed the terrifying reputation Marco had described. She pushed through the restaurant's entrance for her evening shift, desperately trying to focus on anything other than the corner booth that had, once again, been reserved for tonight. The same booth, the same time. Antonio had pulled her aside that morning, his expression grave. Mr. Moretti requested that you be his server tonight. Antonio's hands had trembled as he spoke. Sarah, please, whatever happens, just be polite. Professional. Don't. He struggled to find the right words. Don't challenge him again. Now, as she tied her red apron and checked her appearance in the staff room mirror, Sarah felt her stomach clench with apprehension. She'd spent the past 3 nights immersed in research on nursing techniques and pediatric care, trying to push away thoughts of dark eyes and a dangerous smile. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, saw the way he'd looked at her after those 3 words, like she was an intricate puzzle that he was determined to solve. The dinner service started normally enough. Sarah took orders, delivered meals, and accepted compliments on the food with practiced grace. But at precisely 8 o'clock, the atmosphere in the restaurant subtly shifted. Dante Moretti walked through the front entrance as if he owned not just the restaurant but the entire city block. 2 men flanked him, bodyguards, Sarah realized, noticing the telltale bulges beneath their jackets that suggested concealed weapons she desperately hoped were just for show. Dante himself was wearing another impeccably tailored suit, this one charcoal gray with a black shirt underneath, worn without a tie. The gold chain at his throat caught the light as he moved. His eyes immediately found her across the crowded room, and something in his gaze made her breath catch in her throat. Antonio practically ran to greet him, ushering him to the corner booth with the kind of deference usually reserved for royalty. The bodyguards took up positions nearby, their very presence making the other diners shift uncomfortably in their seats. Sarah. Antonio appeared at her elbow, his voice tight with barely suppressed anxiety. Table 1. She nodded, gathering her composure like a suit of armor. When she approached the corner booth, Dante was studying the menu that he surely had memorized by now. Good evening, Mr. Moretti. Professional, polite, exactly what Antonio had begged for. Sarah. The way he said her name like he'd been thinking about it, tasting it, made her pulse quicken. I was hoping you'd be here tonight. I work 5 nights a week, as I mentioned. Yes. His lips curved slightly. You did mention that. An awkward silence stretched between them. Sarah waited, pen poised over her notepad. Aren't you going to ask if I want my usual? Dante's tone held a hint of amusement. I assumed you'd tell me if you wanted something different. You assume a lot about me. I assume nothing about you, Mr. Moretti. I don't know you. His smile widened. No, you don't. But you're not afraid to stand up to me anyway. Being afraid and being respectful are different things. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I'll show respect to anyone who shows it to me first. Dante leaned back in the booth, studying her with an intensity that made her feel strangely exposed. Do you know who I am now? I imagine your coworkers have filled you in. I know you're important enough that everyone in this restaurant treats you like you could destroy their lives with a single word. And does that frighten you? Sarah considered the question honestly. It concerns me. Power without accountability usually does. A laugh, genuine and surprised, escaped him. You're remarkable. Truly remarkable. I'm a nursing student who waits tables to pay tuition. There's nothing remarkable about that. You don't see yourself clearly. Dante's expression grew serious. Most people look at me and see a title, a reputation, a threat. You look at me and see a man who was rude about his dinner. Weren't you? I was having a bad day. He paused. That's not an excuse. It's an explanation. Apology accepted. Sarah's tone softened slightly. Now what would you like to eat? Have dinner with me. The request hung in the air between them, thick with unspoken implications. Sarah blinked, certain she'd misheard. I'm working. After your shift, then, Mr. Moretti. Dante. His voice was quiet but firm. When you're not on the clock, call me Dante. That wouldn't be appropriate. Why not? Sarah struggled to formulate an answer that didn't sound like the truth. That every instinct screamed this man was dangerous. That getting involved with someone like him was career suicide at best and potentially lethal at worst. Because you're a customer and I'm staff. There are boundaries. Boundaries. Dante repeated the word as if it were foreign to him. I've built my entire life on breaking boundaries that other people accept as absolute. That's not the recommendation you think it is. Another laugh, this one tinged with something darker, escaped him. No, I suppose it isn't. He studied her for a long moment. What if I told you I can't stop thinking about you? That for 3 days I've conducted business meetings, handled problems, made decisions that affect hundreds of people, and through it all I kept seeing your face. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. I'd say you don't know me well enough for that to be true. Then let me know you. Dante's intensity was almost palpable. One dinner, one conversation. If you still want nothing to do with me after that, I'll never ask again. And if I say no right now, his expression faltered slightly, then I'll respect that decision and order my usual meal like nothing happened. She should say no. Every rational part of her brain was screaming at her to say no. But there was something in his eyes, a vulnerability that seemed completely at odds with the dangerous man everyone described. It was like he was asking for something he'd forgotten how to want. One dinner, Sarah heard herself say. After my shift, somewhere public. Dante's smile could have melted steel. Anywhere you want. The cafe 2 blocks from here, 11 o'clock. I'll be there. He handed her the menu without even looking at it. And for now, I'll have the ossobuco medium rare. Sarah couldn't suppress the small smile that tugged at her lips. Of course, Mr. Moretti. Dante, he corrected softly. Dante, she repeated, and watched something fierce and possessive flash across his face at the sound of his name on her lips. As Sarah walked back to the kitchen, she could feel the weight of every eye in the restaurant following her. What had she just agreed to? Marco would think she'd lost her mind. Antonio would probably have a heart attack. But when she glanced back just once, Dante was watching her with an expression that looked almost like hope, and that, more than anything, terrified her. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Sarah went through the motions, taking orders, delivering food, smiling at customers, while her mind raced with second thoughts. At 10:45, she changed out of her uniform in the staff room, her hands shaking slightly as she buttoned her simple blue dress. You're really doing this? Marco stood in the doorway, his expression a mix of concern and disbelief. One coffee, one conversation with a man who makes senators nervous. Marco crossed his arms. Sarah, I've worked here for 8 years. I've seen things, heard things. The Moretti family doesn't play by normal rules. I know. Do you really know? Because this isn't some bad boy with a motorcycle, Sarah. This is. He lowered his voice conspiratorially. There are rumors about what happens to people who cross his organization, about the methods they use to maintain control. He's not going to hurt me over coffee. Marco, maybe not directly, but his world. Marco shook his head. That world destroys people just by proximity. Sarah finished buttoning her dress, meeting her friend's worried gaze in the mirror. I appreciate your concern, really, but I can handle myself. That's what worries me. Marco sighed. You're strong enough to stand up to him, but maybe not smart enough to run away. His words followed her out of the restaurant and down the 2 blocks to Yeppy's Cafe, a 24-hour spot popular with students and night shift workers. Through the wide windows, she could see Dante already seated in a corner booth, somehow making the humble cafe look like a high-end establishment simply by his presence. His bodyguards waited outside. She noted. At least he'd respected her request for a public place. Sarah pushed through the door, and Dante immediately stood, the gesture old-fashioned and oddly charming. You came. Relief colored his voice. I said I would. Sarah slid into the booth across from him. I don't make promises I can't keep. Up close, without the dramatic lighting of Valentino's, she could see details she'd missed before. Faint scars on his knuckles. A tiny scar above his left eyebrow. Shadows under his eyes that suggested sleep didn't come easily. Coffee? Dante gestured to the server, who was hovering nervously nearby. Please, black. They sat in silence until the coffee arrived, both seemingly unsure of how to begin this conversation they'd insisted on having. Why me? Sarah finally asked, cutting to the chase. You could have anyone. Women who understand your world, who'd jump at the chance to be with someone like you. Someone like me? Dante's expression hardened slightly. You mean someone who operates outside the law? Someone whose family name is synonymous with organized crime? I didn't say that, but you thought it. Marco told you, didn't he, about who the Morettas are? Sarah didn't deny it. He told me to be careful, that you're dangerous. And are you being careful? I'm here, aren't I? She wrapped her hands around the coffee mug. That's either incredibly brave or monumentally stupid. Brave, Dante said quietly. Definitely brave. You haven't answered my question. Why me? He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his untouched coffee cup. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, with less of the commanding edge she'd heard at the restaurant. Do you know what it's like to live in a world where everyone lies to you? Where every conversation is calculated, every smile is fake, every compliment is designed to gain favor or avoid punishment. Dante's dark eyes met hers. I've lived that way since I was 22 years old. 10 years of people telling me what they think I want to hear instead of the truth. That sounds lonely. It is. The admission seemed to cost him something. And then you, this waitress I've never met, you looked me in the eye and refused to back down. You didn't care that I was angry, didn't care about my reputation or my family name. You just stood your ground. You were being unreasonable about the food. A genuine laugh escaped him. I was completely unreasonable. I was angry about business and took it out on your chef's perfectly cooked veal. See, the truth isn't so hard. It is when you've forgotten how to tell it. Dante leaned forward, his intensity returning. For 3 days, I couldn't stop thinking about those 3 words. You don't own me. Nobody talks to me like that, Sarah. Nobody dares. Maybe someone should have a long time ago. Maybe. His smile was sad. My father used to say that absolute power corrupts absolutely. I always thought he was weak for believing that. Now, I wonder if he was just wise enough to see the cage before it closed. Sarah felt her defensive walls cracking slightly. This wasn't the dangerous crime Lord Marco had described. This was a man who seemed tired of his own power, exhausted by the role he'd been born into. How did you end up in this life? The question escaped before she could stop it. Dante's expression shuddered. That's a longer conversation. One I'm not sure you're ready for. Try me. He studied her face like he was trying to determine how much truth she could handle. My father ran the Moretti organization before me. When I was 22, rivals made a move against us. My father, he didn't survive the power struggle that followed. I'm sorry. Don't be. He knew the risks. Dante's voice was flat, emotionless in the way of someone who'd learned to bury pain deep. I inherited his empire, his enemies, and his reputation. I was given a choice. Lead the family or watch it crumble while the vultures picked at the remains. That's not much of a choice. No, he agreed. It wasn't. Sarah found herself leaning forward, drawn into his story despite her better judgment. Do you ever regret it? The life you chose? Every day. The answer was immediate and raw. But regret doesn't change reality. I've done things. He stopped, his jaw tightening. I've made decisions I can't take back. Built a reputation on fear and absolute control because in my world, weakness gets you killed. And now I'm sitting in a cafe at midnight drinking coffee with a nursing student who stood up to me over veal, and I can't remember the last time I felt this normal. Dante's laugh was self-deprecating. Pathetic, isn't it? It's honest. Sarah reached across the table before she could second-guess the gesture, her hand covering his. And honesty is never pathetic. The moment her skin touched his, electricity seemed to arc between them. Dante's eyes widened slightly, and Sarah felt heat flood her cheeks. She started to pull away, but his other hand covered hers, holding it gently in place. Sarah. Her name was barely a whisper. You should run from me. You should finish this coffee, walk out that door, and never look back. Is that what you want? What I want. His grip tightened slightly. What I want is dangerous for both of us. Let me make my own decisions about danger. Dante's phone buzzed insistently on the table. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Finally, with obvious reluctance, he glanced at the screen. Whatever he saw there made his expression go cold and hard. The dangerous crime lord replacing the vulnerable man in an instant. I have to go. He stood abruptly. There's a situation that requires my attention. Is everything okay? It will be. The promise in those 3 words was all the more terrifying because the words were ominous. Once I handle it, Sarah stood too, suddenly uncertain. Will I see you again? Dante pulled out his wallet, leaving $300 bills on the table for 2 cups of coffee. When he looked at her, the warmth had returned to his eyes despite the tension in his 26 minutes and 49 seconds jaw. Count on it? He hesitated, then reached out to tuck a strand of her light brown hair behind her ear, the gesture surprisingly gentle from such dangerous hands. Be careful going home. Take a cab. I left enough to cover it. I don't need. Please go. The words seemed to pain him. Let me do this one normal thing. Let me worry about you getting home safely. Sarah nodded, too overwhelmed to argue. Dante started toward the door, his bodyguards materializing from the shadows outside. 27 minutes and 24 seconds at the threshold. He turned back. Those 3 words you said at the restaurant. You were right. I don't own you. His smile was fierce and possessive all at once. But I'm going to spend every day trying to earn the right to be in your life. Then he was gone, leaving Sarah standing in the cafe with a racing heart and the terrifying realization that she was already in too deep to walk away. Outside, she could see him speaking rapidly to his men. His entire demeanor transformed into something cold and 27 minutes and 56 seconds lethal. This was the man Marco warned her about, the man who made people disappear. But she'd also seen the other man, the one who seemed desperate for a taste of normally, who'd looked at her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning for years. Sarah flagged down a cab with shaking hands, Dante's money still warm in her palm. As the city lights blurred past her window, she couldn't help but wonder what situation had called him away so urgently. And somewhere across the city, in a 28 minutes and 27 seconds warehouse by the docks, Dante Moretti stood over a man who'd made the fatal mistake of stealing from him, his expression carved from ice. You took from my family. His voice was quiet, deadly. You know what that means, the man whimpered, pleading. But Dante's mind was elsewhere, on light brown hair and fearless blue eyes, on a girl who touched his hand like he deserved gentleness instead of fear. Take care of it, he told his men, turning away before the inevitable conclusion. And 29 minutes and 1 second make sure everyone knows what happens to thieves. As he walked out of the warehouse, Dante pulled out his phone and looked at Sarah's contact information. Antonio had been persuaded to share it. His thumb hovered over her number. He should leave her alone. Should let her live her normal life, finish nursing school, find some ordinary guy who could give her the safe, predictable future she deserved. But Dante Moretti had spent 10 years taking what he wanted without apology. And he'd never wanted anything as much 29 minutes and 32 seconds as he wanted Sarah Mitchell. 2 weeks passed in a blur of text messages, late-night phone calls, and stolen moments between Sarah's shifts and Dante's increasingly mysterious business meetings. They met for coffee 3 more times, each conversation peeling back another layer of the armor they both wore. Sarah learned that Dante spoke 4 languages, had a degree in economics from Harvard that he never used, and secretly donated to children's hospitals under shell company names. He 30 minutes and 2 seconds learned that she'd lost both parents in a car accident when she was 19, that she worked 3 jobs to afford nursing school, and that her dream was to work in pediatric oncology. Why cancer? Dante had asked during their last cafe meeting, his hand finding hers across the table like it belonged there. Because kids shouldn't have to be that brave. Sarah's voice had caught. Because someone should fight for them as hard as they're fighting to survive. The look in Dante's eyes had made her breath stop, 30 minutes and 32 seconds, like she'd said something that fundamentally changed how he saw the world. But they hadn't moved beyond these public meetings. No dates at restaurants, no invitations to his world, and certainly nothing like the kiss that Sarah found herself thinking about far too often late at night. Tonight, Valentino was hosting a private event for the city's elite, politicians, business leaders, and the kind of people who moved through society's upper echelons with practiced grace. Sarah had 31 minutes and 2 seconds been asked to work the event, the tips too good to refuse, even though final exams loomed just 2 weeks away. She was carrying a tray of champagne flutes through the crowd when she felt eyes on her. Turning, she found Dante across the room, devastating in a black tuxedo that probably cost more than her entire year's tuition. He was speaking with an older man in an expensive suit, but his attention was focused entirely on her. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Sarah felt heat flood 31 minutes and 33 seconds her cheeks. He excused himself from his conversation and began moving toward her with predatory grace, ignoring the people who tried to stop him for networking opportunities. Sarah sat down her tray with shaking hands, suddenly very aware that she was in her work uniform while he looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. "You're here." Dante's voice was low as he reached her, pitched for her ears only. "I work here, remember? I know. I may have requested your name specifically for tonight's event. Dante, dance with 32 minutes and 7 seconds me. I'm working. The event coordinator owes me a favor." His hand extended toward her. "One dance, Sarah. That's all I'm asking." She should say no. Should remind him about boundaries and professionalism. But the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the entire room made rational thought impossible. Sarah placed her hand in his and Dante's fingers closed around hers with gentle possession. He led her to the edge of the dance floor where other couples swayed to the orchestra's 32 minutes and 39 seconds rendition of a classic standard. His arms slid around her waist, pulling her close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and distinctly him. Sarah's hand rested on his shoulder, and they began to move together like they'd done this 1,000 times before. "You're a good dancer," she observed, trying to ignore how perfectly she fit against him. "My mother insisted on lessons when I was young." Dante's hand spread across the small of her back. "She thought ballroom dancing would make me 33 minutes and 10 seconds civilized. Did it work? What do you think?" Sarah looked up at him at the dangerous beauty of his face, the barely leashed power in how he held her, the way other couples gave them a wide berth on the dance floor. "I think you're capable of being civilized when it suits you and terrifying when it doesn't. And which do you prefer?" "I prefer honesty." She met his dark eyes steadily. "I prefer the man who calls me at midnight because he can't sleep. The one who listens to me complain about organic chemistry 33 minutes and 45 seconds exams and actually seems interested." "I am interested." Dante's voice was intense. "I'm interested in everything about you, Sarah. What you think, what you dream about, what makes you laugh." He pulled her fractionally closer. "What makes you feel, Dante?" Her voice was breathless now. "I know this is complicated. I know I come with baggage that would make most people run for the hills. His jaw tightened. But I can't stop wanting you. Can't stop thinking about you. You've become the first thing 34 minutes and 19 seconds on my mind when I wake up and the last thing before I sleep. You barely know me. Then let me know you better. Let me. He stopped mid-sentence, his entire body going rigid. Sarah felt the change in him instantly. The way his hand on her back shifted from gentle to protective. How his eyes moved past her to scan the room with sudden alertness. What's wrong? Don't turn around. His voice was quiet, commanding. Just keep dancing. But Sarah had already caught sight of what had triggered his reaction. Near 34 minutes and 54 seconds the bar. 3 men in suits were watching them with expressions that made her blood run cold. They weren't looking at Dante with the nervous respect she'd seen from other people. They were looking at him like predators sizing up prey. Who are they? Trouble. Dante's hand tightened on her waist. The tall one is Marco Russo. He runs the North End territory. Rival family. Ambitious rival family. His expression was carved from stone. They've been pushing boundaries lately, testing my patience. 35 minutes and 30 seconds one of the men, Marco Russo, started moving toward them across the dance floor. Dante's bodyguards materialized from the edges of the room, but he subtly waved them back. Moretti. Russo stopped a few feet away, his smile not reaching his cold eyes. Didn't expect to see you at this charity circus. Russo. Dante's voice was pleasant. Lethal. I could say the same. Business brings me everywhere these days. Russo's gaze slid to Sarah with insulting slowness. New acquisition. Sarah felt Dante's entire body coil with 36 minutes and 7 seconds rage. But his expression remained almost bored. Careful, Marco. You're speaking about a lady. My apologies. The words were mocking. I didn't realize the Moretti family had started recruiting from waitstaff. Times must be tough. Walk away, Russo. Dante's voice dropped to something that barely qualified as human while you still can. Or what? You'll make me disappear like the others? Russo laughed, though there was an edge of nervousness to it. We both know those days are numbered. New blood 36 minutes and 41 seconds is coming to this city. Moretti, your family's reign is ending. The orchestra had stopped playing. The entire ballroom had gone silent. Everyone watching the confrontation with horrified fascination. Sarah felt Dante's hand trembling slightly against her back. Not with fear, she realized, but with the effort of restraining himself from violence. This isn't the place. Dante's words were ice. But soon, Marco. Very soon, we're gonna have a long conversation about respect. Looking forward to it. Russo's 37 minutes and 15 seconds smile was ugly. In the meantime, enjoy your waitress while you still can. He walked away, his men following like shadows. The orchestra resumed playing, but the festive atmosphere had shattered. Dante's jaw was set so hard Sarah worried he might crack a tooth. I need to go now. Dante, wait. No. He stepped back from her, and the loss of his warmth felt physical. You need to stay away from me, Sarah. I thought I could. He ran a hand through his hair, destroying its perfect style. I thought I could keep you separate from this 37 minutes and 53 seconds world. But I was wrong. What are you talking about? Russo knows about you now. He saw us together. Which means Dante's expression was anguished. Which means you're a target, a weakness he can exploit. I can handle myself, not against people like him. Dante's hands framed her face. His touch gentle despite the fear in his eyes. You don't understand. These aren't people who play by rules who have limits. If Russo thinks hurting you will hurt me, he couldn't finish the sentence. Then what? 38 minutes and 28 seconds you're going to walk away? Pretend these last 2 weeks didn't happen. If it keeps you safe, yes. Sarah grabbed his wrists, holding his hands against her face. That's not your decision to make. I'm not some fragile thing that needs to be protected from reality. But you are precious. Dante's voice cracked slightly. You're the first good thing I've had in a decade, Sarah. The first pure, honest thing in a life built on lies and violence. I won't let that world touch you. It already has. She 39 minutes and 1 second pulled his hands down, but didn't let go. The moment I stood up to you in this restaurant, The moment I agreed to that first coffee, I stopped being separate from your world. Then I'll push you out of it for your own good. No. Sarah's voice was fierce. You don't get to decide what's good for me. You don't get to make this choice alone. Before Dante could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgency that suggested catastrophe. He looked at the screen and whatever he saw there drained the color from his face. 39 minutes and 35 seconds, what is it? Russo's men just hit one of my warehouses. His voice was hollow. This is a declaration of war. Dante, I have to go. He was already moving toward the exit, his bodyguards flanking him. Stay here. Stay in public. I'll have someone watch your apartment until this is over. Until what's over. But he was already gone, leaving Sarah standing alone on the dance floor while the orchestra played on and the city's elite pretended not to stare. Sarah's hands shook as she returned to work, going 40 minutes and 9 seconds through the motions of serving drinks while her mind raced. This was the world Dante lived in, where threats at parties preceded actual violence, where men talked about eliminating rivals like they were discussing business acquisitions. The event ended at midnight. Sarah changed out of her uniform in the staff room, checking her phone compulsively for messages from Dante. Nothing. She stepped outside to find a black SUV idling at the curb, one of Dante's vehicles with his head of security behind the wheel. Ms. Mitchell. The 40 minutes and 43 seconds man's voice was professional. Mr. Moretti asked me to ensure you get home safely. Sarah wanted to argue to insist she didn't need protection, but the memory of Marco Russo's cold eyes stopped her. She climbed into the SUV, hyper-aware of the second vehicle that followed them through the dark city streets. Her apartment building looked the same as always, the familiar brick facade, the broken light on the third floor, the sounds of her neighbors' lives filtering through thin walls. But now 41 minutes and 15 seconds Sarah saw it through new eyes, understanding how vulnerable she was here. The security guard walked her to her door, checking the apartment before allowing her inside. I'll be in the lobby, Ms. Mitchell. You need anything? Call this number. He handed her a card. Alone in her small studio, Sarah finally allowed herself to process what had happened. Dante's anguished expression, Russo's threatening smile, the revelation that simply being associated with Dante Moretti made her a target in 41 minutes and 47 seconds wars she didn't understand. Her phone buzzed. Finally, Dante, are you home safe? Sarah? Yes. Your security is very thorough. Dante, good. Stay there. Lock the doors. Don't go anywhere alone until I tell you it's safe. Sarah, what's happening? The 3 dots indicating he was typing appeared and disappeared several times before his response came through. Dante, things I hoped you'd never have to know about. The reality of who I am and what my world looks like when it turns violent. Sarah, are you 42 minutes and 28 seconds safe? The question hung unanswered for long minutes. Dante, I'm handling it. But Sarah, I meant what I said. We can't see each other anymore. Not until this is over. Maybe not even then. Sarah, you don't get to decide that alone. Dante, if something happened to you because of me, because of my world, I couldn't survive that. You're the best part of my day. Every day, the only good thing I have, which is exactly why I need to keep you away from the darkness. Sarah stared at her phone, tears burning her 43 minutes and 5 seconds eyes. She'd known this was complicated, had understood on some level that Dante's world came with danger. But the reality was different from the concept. Sharper, more frightening, more real. Her phone rang. Dante's name lit up the screen. Hello. I needed to hear your voice. He sounded exhausted. One last time before I do what needs to be done. What are you going to do, Dante? What I always do when someone threatens my family. His voice was cold, emotionless. I'm going to remind Marco Russo in 43 minutes and 41 seconds everyone else in this city why the Moretti name still means something. That sounds ominous. It should. A pause. The man you've been getting to know these past weeks, the one who drinks coffee at midnight and listens to your stories about organic chemistry. That's who I want to be. But it's not who I am when my family is under attack. You're both people, Dante. One doesn't erase the other, doesn't it? His laugh was bitter. Sarah, I've done things that would horrify you. Made decisions that 44 minutes and 15 seconds destroyed lives. My hands aren't clean, and they never will be. I know. Her voice was quiet, but steady. I've known from the beginning that you're not some misunderstood hero. But I also know you're capable of tenderness, of caring, of being more than what your world demands. You see what you want to see. I see the truth. Both truths. Sarah wiped at her tears. The question is whether you're brave enough to let yourself be both people instead of just the monster everyone expects. Silence on the line, 44 minutes and 49 seconds broken only by the sound of his breathing. I have to go, Dante finally said. The situation requires my attention. Will you call me after? Sarah, please just let me know you're okay. I'll text you. His voice softened fractionally. Lock your doors. Stay safe. You too. The line went dead. Sarah stood in her apartment, hugging herself against a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Somewhere across the city, Dante was preparing to wage war, to be the dangerous crime lord instead of the man who couldn't sleep 45 minutes and 27 seconds without hearing her voice. And she was falling in love with both versions of him. Which, Sarah reflected as she locked her doors and windows with shaking hands, made her either the bravest woman in the city or the biggest fool, possibly both. Outside her building, 2 of Dante's security team took up positions in the shadows. Inside, Sarah curled up on her couch with her phone clutched in her hand, waiting for a text that might never come. Across the city, in the private back room of a social club that never 46 minutes officially existed, Dante Moretti sat at the head of a table surrounded by his most trusted men. Russo made his choice when he hit our warehouse. His voice was cold, calculated. Now we show him what choosing wrong looks like. The men nodded, their expressions grim. They all knew what was coming, the kind of response that would echo through the city's underground for months. But as Dante outlined his strategy, his mind kept drifting to light brown hair and fearless blue eyes, to a girl who believed he could be more than a monster 46 minutes and 35 seconds for her. He thought he would end this war quickly, decisively, and then he would have to make the hardest choice of his life. Keep Sarah safe by walking away or risk her safety by asking her to choose him despite everything she now knew. His phone sat on the table, silent and accusing. 3 words kept echoing in his mind. The same 3 words that had started everything. You don't own me. No, Dante thought as he prepared to unleash hell on Marco Russo. But you own me, Sarah Mitchell. You own every part 47 minutes and 11 seconds of me that remembers how to be human. And that more than any threat from rivals terrified him completely. 3 days of silence. Sarah went to class, took exams, and served tables at Valentino's with mechanical precision, while her mind remained locked on her phone, waiting for a text that never came. The security detail outside her apartment building had doubled. Grim-faced men in dark suits who nodded politely when she passed, but refused to answer questions about Dante. The city felt different now. Sarah noticed things 47 minutes and 45 seconds she'd been blind to before. The way certain neighborhoods went quiet when expensive cars rolled through. How people on the street would suddenly find somewhere else to be when men in suits appeared. The unspoken understanding that some businesses were fronts for activities that never appeared on tax returns. She'd been living in Dante's world without realizing it. Now she couldn't unsee it. On the 4th morning, Sarah woke to find her phone flooded with news alerts. A massive fire 48 minutes and 14 seconds at a warehouse in the North End. Federal investigations into the Russo family's business operations. Marco Russo himself had reportedly left the city, though the articles were vague about whether his departure was voluntary. The war, it seemed, had ended. But at what cost? Sarah's phone finally buzzed with a text. Dante, can I see you? Tonight, the cafe, please. Her hands shook as she typed her response. Sarah, what time? Dante, whenever you can get there. I'll wait as long as it takes. She should 48 minutes and 51 seconds have been angry about the days of silence, the fear and uncertainty. Instead, Sarah felt relief flood through her so intensely, it made her dizzy. He was alive. He was safe. And he wanted to see her. Sarah called in sick to work, the first time she'd done so in 3 years, and spent the day oscillating between excitement and dread. What would he tell her? How bad had things gotten? And most importantly, Did he still want to push her away for her own protection? By 7 o'clock, she couldn't wait any longer. 49 minutes and 24 seconds. Sarah dressed carefully in a blue sweater and jeans, applied minimal makeup, and braided her light brown hair over one shoulder. In the mirror, she looked young and nervous, nothing like someone who should be involved with a man who wielded the kind of power Dante commanded. The cafe was nearly empty when she arrived. Dante sat in their usual corner booth, and Sarah's breath caught at the sight of him. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, his normally perfect hair slightly disheveled, and a tension in his 49 minutes and 57 seconds shoulders that suggested he hadn't slept in days. When he saw her, something in his expression cracked. Relief, longing, and pain all mixed together. Sarah slid into the booth across from him, and for a long moment, they just stared at each other. "You look terrible," she finally said. A surprised laugh escaped him. "Always honest. You asked me to be." "I did." Dante's hand reached across the table, palm up, an invitation. Sarah placed her hand in his, and his fingers 50 minutes and 31 seconds closed around hers like she was a lifeline. "I'm sorry for the silence, for disappearing." For he stopped, struggling with words. "For everything you must have imagined these past few days. What happened with Russo? It's over." His voice was flat, emotionless in the way she'd learned meant he was protecting himself. "His organization is scattered. The federal investigation will keep him occupied for years, and he understands now that coming after my family has consequences." "Did you?" Sarah couldn't finish the 51 minutes and 8 seconds question. "No." Dante's eyes met hers. "I wanted to. Part of me still wants to, but I made him a deal instead. Leave the city, cooperate with federal investigators on unrelated matters, and I'd let him walk away intact." "Why?" "Because of you." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Because the man you see when you look at me, the one who drinks coffee at midnight and listens to your stories, that man doesn't solve everything with violence. And I'm trying to be him more than I'm the other 51 minutes and 42 seconds version." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "That must have been difficult. You have no idea." Dante's jaw tightened. "Every instinct I have, everything I was taught, every example my father set, it all screamed to handle Russo the old way permanently. But then I'd think about you, about the disappointment." The words hung heavy, laced with foreboding. "Once I handle it." The weight of those words settled on Sarah, and she rose, a sudden uncertainty clouding her face. "Will I see you again?" she asked, the question barely a whisper. Dante reached for his wallet, the smooth leather a familiar comfort in his hand. He placed 3 crisp $100 bills on the table, an absurd sum for 2 cups of coffee. When he looked at her, the warmth had flickered back into his eyes, a fragile flame against the stark tension etched around his jaw. "Count on it," he said, a slight hesitation in his voice. Then, with a surprisingly gentle movement, he reached out and tucked a strand of her light brown hair behind her ear. It was a tender gesture, unexpected from hands that could be so dangerous. "Be careful going home," he urged, his voice softening. "Take a cab. I left enough to cover it." He paused, a flicker of something that looked like pain crossing his features. "I don't need. Please go." The word seemed to catch in his throat, as if forcing it out cost him something. "Let me do this one normal thing," he pleaded, his eyes locked on hers. "Let me worry about you getting home safely." Sarah nodded, the enormity of the situation stealing her voice. She was too overwhelmed to argue, too caught up in the swirling emotions that threatened to consume her. Dante started toward the door, his movements purposeful, his shoulders squared. As if summoned by an unspoken command, his bodyguards materialized from the shadows outside, their presence a stark reminder of the world he inhabited. He paused at the threshold, turning back to face her. "Those 3 words you said at the restaurant," he began, his gaze intense. "You were right. I don't own you." A fierce smile played on his lips, a smile that was both possessive and vulnerable. "But I'm going to spend every day trying to earn the right to be in your life." And then he was gone, leaving Sarah standing alone in the cafe, her heart racing, a terrifying realization sinking in. She was already in too deep to walk away. Outside, through the window, she saw him speaking rapidly to his men. His gestures sharp and commanding. His entire demeanor had transformed, hardening into something cold and lethal. This was the man Marco had warned her about, the man who made people disappear, the man who operated in a world of shadows and violence. But she'd also glimpsed the other man, the one who seemed desperately hungry for a taste of normalcy, the one who had looked at her as if she were oxygen, and he'd been drowning for years. With trembling hands, Sarah flagged down a taxi, the warmth of Dante's money still lingering in her palm. As the city lights blurred past her window, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She couldn't help but wonder what urgent situation had called him away, what crisis had demanded his immediate attention. And somewhere across the city, in a desolate warehouse by the docks, Dante Moretti stood over a man who had made the fatal mistake of stealing from him. His expression was carved from ice, his eyes devoid of all warmth. "You took from my family," he stated, his voice quiet but deadly, each word a hammer blow. The man whimpered, a pathetic sound in the vast space, pleading for mercy that would not come. "You know what that means," he choked out, his voice trembling. But Dante's mind was elsewhere, far from the warehouse and the whimpering thief. He was thinking of light brown hair and fearless blue eyes, of a girl who had touched his hand as if he deserved gentleness instead of fear. "Take care of it," he instructed his men, turning away before the inevitable conclusion. "And make sure everyone knows what happens to thieves." As he walked out of the warehouse, the stench of fear and desperation clinging to the air, Dante pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Sarah's information. Antonio had been persuaded to share it, a decision Dante was beginning to question. His thumb hovered over her number, a silent battle raging within him. He should leave her alone. He should let her live her normal life, finish nursing school, find some ordinary guy who could give her the safe, predictable future she deserved. That was the right thing to do, the decent thing. But Dante Moretti had spent 10 years taking what he wanted without apology, carving out his own empire in a world where the only rules were power and survival. And he'd never wanted anything as much as he wanted Sarah Mitchell. The thought was a dangerous current, threatening to pull him under. 2 weeks passed in a blur of text messages, late-night phone calls that stretched into the early hours of the morning, and stolen moments between Sarah's shifts and Dante's increasingly mysterious business meetings. They met for coffee 3 more times, each conversation peeling back another layer of the armor they both wore, revealing glimpses of the people beneath. Sarah learned that Dante spoke 4 languages fluently, had a degree in economics from Harvard that he never used, and secretly donated vast sums of money to children's hospitals, always operating through shell companies to maintain his anonymity. These glimpses of the man beneath the ruthless exterior intrigued her, fueling the dangerous spark that had ignited between them. He, in turn, learned that she'd lost both her parents in a tragic car accident when she was just 19, that she worked 3 grueling jobs to afford nursing school, and that her unwavering dream was to work in pediatric oncology, to ease the suffering of children battling cancer. "Why cancer?" Dante had asked during their last cafe meeting, his hand finding hers across the table as if it belonged there. "Because kids shouldn't have to be that brave," Sarah had replied, her voice catching with emotion. "Because someone should fight for them as hard as they're fighting to survive." The look in Dante's eyes at that moment had made her breath stop, as if she'd said something that fundamentally changed how he saw the world, as if she had opened a door to a part of himself he had long thought lost. But they hadn't moved beyond these carefully orchestrated public meetings. No dates at fancy restaurants, no invitations to his opulent world, and certainly nothing like the kiss that Sarah found herself thinking about far too often in the quiet hours of the night. Tonight, Valentino's was hosting a private event for the city's elite. Politicians, powerful business leaders, and the kind of people who moved through society's upper echelons with practiced grace and effortless ease. Sarah had been asked to work the event. The tips were far too good to refuse, even though final exams loomed just 2 weeks away, a constant source of anxiety. She was carefully carrying a tray of champagne flutes through the crowded room, navigating the sea of expensive suits and glittering gowns, when she felt eyes on her, a palpable weight of attention. Turning, she found Dante across the room, a devastating figure in a black tuxedo that probably cost more than her entire year's tuition. He was speaking with an older man in an impeccably tailored suit, his expression serious, but his attention was focused entirely on her, a laser beam of intensity cutting through the noise and the crowd. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Sarah felt heat flood her cheeks, a blush that betrayed her carefully guarded composure. He excused himself from his conversation with a brief nod and began moving toward her with a predatory grace, ignoring the subtle attempts by other guests to stop him for networking opportunities. His focus was unwavering, his path direct. Sarah carefully set down her tray of champagne flutes with shaking hands, suddenly acutely aware that she was in her decidedly unglamorous work uniform, while he looked like he'd stepped straight out of the pages of a high-fashion magazine. The disparity between their worlds felt vast and unbridgeable. "You're here?" Dante's voice was low and husky as he reached her, pitched for her ears alone. A private communication in a public space. "I work here, remember?" she replied, trying to inject a note of lightness into her voice, to mask the sudden surge of nerves. "I know," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I may have requested your name specifically for tonight's event." "Dante," she began, a warning in her tone, a reminder of the boundaries they had ostensibly agreed upon. "Dance with me." "I'm working," she protested, gesturing to her uniform, to the responsibilities that tied her to this place. "The event coordinator owes me a favor," he countered, a hint of amusement in his eyes. He extended his hand toward her, his fingers outstretched in invitation. "One dance, Sarah. That's all I'm asking." She knew she should say no. She should remind him about boundaries and professionalism, about the impossibility of their situation. But the way he looked at her, as if she were the only person in the entire room, as if the rest of the world had faded into a blurry background, made rational thought impossible. With a sigh of resignation, Sarah placed her hand in his, and Dante's fingers closed around hers with a gentle but possessive grip. He led her to the edge of the dance floor, where other couples swayed in time to the orchestra's rendition of a classic standard, their movements fluid and graceful. His arms slid around her waist, pulling her close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and sophisticated, a scent that was distinctly him, a blend of dark spices and subtle citrus that both intrigued and unsettled her. Sarah's hand rested lightly on his shoulder, and they began to move together, their bodies falling into a natural rhythm as if they'd done this 1,000 times before, their steps synchronized and effortless. "You're a good dancer?" she observed, trying to ignore the way she fit so perfectly against him, the way his warmth seemed to seep into her bones. "My mother insisted on lessons when I was young," Dante replied, his hand spreading across the small of her back, drawing her even closer. "She thought ballroom dancing would make me civilized." "Did it work?" Sarah asked, tilting her head back to look up at him, studying the dangerous beauty of his face, the barely leashed power in the way he held her, the way other couples instinctively gave them a wide berth on the dance floor. "What do you think?" "I think you're capable of being civilized when it suits you," she said, her voice soft, "and terrifying when it doesn't." A flicker of a smile touched his lips. "And which do you prefer?" "I prefer honesty," she answered, meeting his dark eyes steadily, refusing to look away. "I prefer the man who calls me at midnight because he can't sleep, the one who listens to me complain about organic chemistry exams and actually seems interested." "I am interested." Dante's voice was intense, his gaze unwavering. "I'm interested in everything about you, Sarah. What you think, what you dream about, what makes you laugh." He pulled her fractionally closer, his breath warm against her ear. "What makes you feel, Dante?" Her voice was breathless now, barely a whisper. "I know this is complicated," he said, his jaw tightening, the familiar shadows returning to his eyes. "I know I come with baggage that would make most people run for the hills." He hesitated as if carefully choosing his words. "But I can't stop wanting you, can't stop thinking about you. You've become the first thing on my mind when I wake up and the last thing before I sleep." "You barely know me," Sarah protested, even as her heart soared at his words. "Then let me know you better," he urged, his voice rough with emotion. "Let me." He stopped mid-sentence, his entire body going rigid, every muscle tensing. Sarah felt the change in him instantly, a sudden shift in his energy. The way his hand on her back had been gentle now tightened protectively, the subtle pressure a silent warning. How his eyes, which had been focused solely on her, now moved past her, scanning the room with sudden alertness, assessing every potential threat. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with concern, the music suddenly seeming too loud, the laughter too jarring. "Don't turn around," he commanded, his voice quiet but firm, a barely audible directive. "Just keep dancing." But Sarah had already caught sight of what had triggered his reaction. Near the bar, 3 men in dark suits were watching them with expressions that made her blood run cold. They weren't looking at Dante with the nervous respect she'd seen from other people, the deference that came with fear and power. They were looking at him like predators sizing up prey, their eyes narrowed, their faces hard. "Who are they?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, fear tightening its grip on her. "Trouble," Dante replied, his hand tightening on her waist, his grip. "I'd see it in your eyes if I chose violence over restraint." And he shook his head, a small, almost imperceptible movement. "You're changing me, Sarah, making me question things I've accepted as absolute truth my entire life. Is that a bad thing?" His voice was low, almost a murmur. "I don't know yet." His smile was sad, tinged with a melancholy that tugged at her heart. "What I do know is that these past 4 days without talking to you were the longest of my life. I'd reach for my phone 100 times, wanting to hear your voice, needing to know you were safe. But I also knew that until the situation with Russo was resolved, any contact with you put you in more danger. I was worried about you too," she admitted, her voice soft. "You shouldn't be. I can handle men like Russo. I've been handling them my whole life," she asserted, a touch of defiance in her tone. Dante's expression grew serious, his eyes dark and intense. "But Sarah, I need you to understand what being with me means. This won't be the last threat. There will always be someone ambitious, someone who wants what the Moretti family has, someone who will look for weaknesses to exploit, and I'm a weakness. You're the only thing that matters to me anymore." The raw honesty in his voice made her chest tighten, a painful ache that resonated deep within her. Which, yes, makes you a vulnerability in a world where showing vulnerability can be fatal. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing what he was really saying, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You're trying to push me away again, for my own good," she stated, understanding dawning in her eyes. "I'm trying to give you all the information, so you can make an informed choice." Dante's grip on her hand tightened, a silent plea for understanding. "I won't lie to you, Sarah. Being with me comes with risks. Security details, limited privacy, always wondering if someone is watching, waiting for an opportunity. It's not the normal life you deserve. And if I choose that life anyway, risks and all?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Hope flickered in his dark eyes, a brief spark that was quickly suppressed, as if he didn't dare allow himself to believe it. "Then I'd spend every day trying to be worthy of that choice, trying to be more of the man you see and less of the monster everyone else fears." "You're not a monster, Dante," she insisted, her voice firm. "I've done monstrous things to protect my family, to survive in a world I was born into," he countered, his voice laced with a weariness that belied his age. Sarah leaned forward, her blue eyes intense, unwavering in their gaze. "I'm not naive enough to think you're some misunderstood hero, but I also don't think you're beyond redemption, beyond change." "Sarah," his voice cracked slightly, a raw emotion breaking through his carefully constructed facade. "I've been thinking about this for 4 days, about what I want, what I'm willing to risk." She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I choose you, Dante. All of you. The part that's dangerous and the part that's gentle. The crime lord and the man who can't sleep without hearing my voice." "You don't know what you're saying," he exclaimed, his voice filled with disbelief. Yes, I do. Her voice was firm, unwavering in her decision. I'm choosing to walk into this with open eyes, to accept the risks because the alternative, living without you, feels worse than any danger your world presents. Dante stood abruptly, pulling her up with him, his movements urgent. Before Sarah could process what was happening, his hands framed her face, and his lips crashed against hers in a kiss that was equal parts desperation and reverence. A claiming and a worship all in one. Sarah gasped against his mouth, and Dante took advantage, deepening the kiss with an intensity that made her knees weak. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him, and Sarah's hands fisted in his shirt, holding on like he was the only solid thing in her spinning world. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, ragged gasps escaping their lips, Dante rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. I love you. The words tumbled out like a confession, a secret he could no longer contain. I know it's too soon. I know I shouldn't feel this strongly this fast. But Sarah, I love you. You've become essential to me in a way I didn't think was possible. I love you too. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, a fragile admission in the face of his intensity. I'm terrified and exhilarated and completely out of my depth. But I love you. Dante pulled back just enough to look at her. His expression transformed. The exhaustion was still there, the shadows under his eyes. But now there was also something that looked like joy, a radiant light that banished the darkness. Come home with me. His voice was rough, a plea rather than a command. Not for, I just want you close. Want to fall asleep knowing you're safe. Sarah nodded, beyond words, her heart overflowing with a love she never knew existed. The drive to Dante's penthouse was quiet, a comfortable silence filled with unspoken emotions, his hand never leaving hers in the back of the SUV. His security team followed at a discreet distance, a constant reminder of the life she was choosing, and Sarah tried not to think about the fact that she needed armed guards to visit her boyfriend's home. The penthouse was everything Sarah had expected and nothing like she'd imagined. Yes, there was luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a breathtaking panorama of glittering lights, furniture that probably cost more than her yearly tuition, exquisite pieces that spoke of wealth and refined taste, art on the walls that might have been original masterpieces, priceless works that adorned the spacious rooms. But there were also unexpected details that revealed the man beneath the title, the person she was falling in love with. Books everywhere, dog-eared and well-read, scattered across tables and overflowing from shelves, evidence of a curious mind. A telescope pointed at the night sky, an invitation to explore the vastness of the universe. Framed photos of a woman who had to be his mother, her smile warm and genuine, a reflection of the love she had poured into her son. A guitar in the corner, worn from use, its strings slightly tarnished, a silent testament to a passion set aside. You play. Sarah gestured to the instrument, her curiosity piqued. Used to? Dante shrugged, a hint of regret in his voice. Before everything else took priority, you should start again. She encouraged, her eyes filled with warmth. Maybe I will. He conceded, a glimmer of possibility in his expression. He pulled her into his arms, just holding her, a silent embrace that spoke volumes. Stay with me tonight, every night. Move in here where I know you're protected. Dante, I can't just... She started, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his request. I know, too fast, too much. He pressed a kiss to her temple, a gentle reassurance. But promise me you'll think about it, about making this permanent. Sarah pulled back to look at him, her eyes searching his. Permanent as in living together? Or permanent as in something more? All of it. Dante's expression was fierce, possessive, and completely vulnerable all at once. A raw display of his deepest desires. I want everything with you, Sarah. The whole impossible future. But I'll take whatever you're willing to give and be grateful for it. Ask me again, she whispered, her heart racing, her mind struggling to reconcile the reality of their situation with the intensity of her feelings. In a few months, when we've had time to navigate this together, When I've finished school and you've had more time to restructure your business into something legitimate. You want me to go legitimate? He asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. I want you to have options. Sarah's hand rested over his heart, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her palm. To build something that isn't dependent on fear and violence. I think you're capable of that. I think you want that. Dante was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on her, his mind grappling with the possibilities she presented. I've been thinking about it, about what my life could look like if I stepped back from the family business, appointed someone else to handle day-to-day operations while I focus on our legal enterprises. You have legal enterprises, real estate, investments, a few restaurants. She listed, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. His smile was self-deprecating, a rare moment of humility. Turns out I'm actually good at legitimate business when I apply myself. I just never had a reason to before. And now, she prompted, her eyes filled with hope. And now, he said, his voice soft with emotion. Now I have the best reason in the world. He kissed her softly, a gentle promise of the future they could build together. They spent the night on his couch, wrapped in each other's arms, talking about everything and nothing, sharing pieces of themselves they had never revealed to anyone else. Dante told her about his mother, who died when he was 15, taken by cancer, the same disease Sarah wanted to help children fight. Sarah told him about her parents, about the scholarship that had made nursing school possible, about her dreams of making a real difference in the lives of others. As the city lights glittered below them and dawn began to paint the sky pink with hues of rose and gold, Sarah realized she'd never felt safer or more certain about anything in her life. This was dangerous. This was complicated. This was going to require sacrifices and compromises from both of them. But it was also real and worth fighting for. Dante's phone buzzed insistently around 6 a.m. He answered it with obvious reluctance, his arm still wrapped around Sarah, reluctant to break the spell of their shared intimacy. What is it, Marcus? He listened for a moment, his expression hardening, the tenderness of the night before fading into a mask of controlled intensity. When I see no handle it the way we discussed, the new way. He glanced at Sarah, a silent apology in his eyes. Because things are different now. We're different. When he hung up, Sarah raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. Problem? Someone testing our boundaries. Seeing if my handling of Russo means I've gone soft. Dante's smile was predatory, a flash of the darkness that still resided within him. Marcus is going to demonstrate that restraint isn't weakness, that we can handle threats without defaulting to violence. I'm proud of you, she said softly, her heart swelling with admiration. Don't be proud yet. This is harder than you know. Every instinct fights against it. His expression grew serious, his eyes filled with a vulnerability that belied his strength. But I meant what I said. I'm trying to be better for you, for us, for the future. I want to build. Sarah kissed him slow and deep, a silent promise of support and unwavering belief. Then we'll build it together. 6 weeks later, Sarah stood in Dante's home office, watching him conduct a business meeting via video conference. He was negotiating the sale of several properties, his business acumen on full display as he navigated complex financial discussions with the ease of someone who'd been doing this his entire life. This was the legitimate side of his empire, the part he was systematically expanding while slowly extracting himself from the family's traditional operations. It wasn't easy. Old loyalties and expectations fought against every change. But Dante was stubborn, and with Sarah's support, he was reshaping what it meant to be a Moretti. The meeting ended, and Dante leaned back in his chair with a satisfied expression, a sense of accomplishment etched on his face. That's the Harbor District development locked down. Completely legal, completely clean. I'm impressed. Sarah moved behind him, her hands resting on his shoulders, her fingers gently massaging the tension from his muscles. How much of the business is legitimate now? About 40%. He tilted his head back to look at her, his eyes filled with pride. Another year and I think I can get it to 70, maybe higher. And the rest being transferred to trusted people who understand that things are changing. that the Moretti family is moving in a new direction. His hand covered hers, his fingers interlacing with hers in a silent gesture of love and commitment. It's slow, frustrating, but it's working. Sarah had moved into the penthouse 3 weeks ago, her small apartment packed up and left behind, a symbolic step towards their shared future. Nursing school was demanding, a constant juggling act of classes, clinicals, and studying, but Dante had converted one of his spare rooms into a study space for her, complete with medical textbooks and a state-of-the-art computer system, a testament to his unwavering support. Her finals were in 2 weeks, the culmination of years of hard work and dedication. After that, she'd graduate and begin her residency at Children's Memorial Hospital, a position that had nothing to do with Dante's influence and everything to do with her stellar academic record and passionate interview. Life had settled into an unexpected rhythm. Sarah studied and attended classes while Dante rebuilt his empire into something that could survive without fear as its foundation. They had dinner together every night when possible, sharing long conversations about their days, their dreams, their future, building a foundation of trust and understanding. The security was still there. Guards at the building entrance, background checks on anyone who came near Sarah, armored vehicles for transportation, a constant reminder of the world they inhabited. But she'd grown accustomed to it, understanding that this was the price of loving Dante Moretti. "I have something for you." Dante stood, pulling a small velvet box from his desk drawer. Sarah's heart stopped, a sudden surge of anticipation flooding her veins. "Dante, it's not," she started, her voice tinged with nervousness. "Not what you think." His smile was gentle, reassuring. "Not yet. I promise to wait until you finish school." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant, a subtle yet significant symbol of his love. A lion, the symbol of the Moretti family, but rendered in elegant, understated lines. A modern interpretation of a timeless emblem. "It's beautiful," she breathed, her eyes filled with admiration. "It's protection." Dante's expression grew serious, his voice filled with sincerity. "Everyone in our world knows this symbol. Wearing it means you're under Moretti protection. That hurting you means declaring war on my entire family." Sarah understood the significance of what he was offering. This wasn't just jewelry. It was a statement to everyone in his world that she was his and therefore untouchable. A powerful declaration of his love and commitment. "Will you wear it?" Dante's voice held uncertainty, as if he genuinely feared she might refuse, despite everything they had shared. "Yes." Sarah turned, lifting her hair so he could fasten the clasp, her hands trembling slightly with emotion. The pendant settled against her skin, warm and surprisingly comfortable, a tangible reminder of his love and protection. When she turned back, Dante's expression was fierce, possessive, and filled with an undeniable love. "I know I said I'd wait to ask the big questions, but Sarah, I need you to know. When you graduate, when you're ready, I'm going to ask you to marry me, and I hope you'll say yes." "I hope so, too." Her voice was soft but certain, filled with a love that mirrored his. Dante pulled her into his arms, and Sarah melted against him, marveling at how natural this had become. 6 weeks ago, she'd been terrified of this world, of what it meant to love someone like Dante, of the danger and uncertainty that surrounded him. Now, she couldn't imagine her life without him, without his strength, his love, his unwavering belief in her. His phone buzzed, breaking the spell of their intimate moment. Dante glanced at the screen and swore under his breath, his jaw tightening with barely suppressed anger. "What is it, Marco? Russo?" Apparently, exile and federal investigations weren't enough to keep him quiet. "He's been talking to the press, making accusations about the family's business practices. Can he prove anything?" Sarah asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "No, but he doesn't need to. Rumors and suspicion can be just as damaging as facts." Dante set the phone down, his expression calculating, his mind already strategizing. "I need to handle this before it becomes a real problem." "How?" she asked, her eyes searching his for any sign of the darkness she feared. "The old me would have silenced him permanently." Dante's hand found hers, his fingers tracing circles on her palm, a gesture of reassurance. The new me is going to fight him in court, with lawyers and legal documents instead of threats. That's terrifying, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Weak, he countered, a self-deprecating smile playing on his lips, completely against everything I was taught. Dante's laugh was self-deprecating, a rare display of humor in the face of adversity. Yeah, but it's also the right thing to do. The legal thing. The thing that doesn't risk everything I'm trying to build. Sarah kissed him, proud and terrified in equal measure, her heart swelling with love and admiration. When do you meet with the lawyers? Tomorrow morning. He pulled her closer, his eyes filled with mischief. Want to come with me? See how boring legitimate business can be? I have class, she protested, a hint of reluctance in her voice. Skip it. He teased, his smile widening. This once. Live dangerously. I'm dating you. I live dangerously every day. She retorted, a playful glint in her eyes. They spent the evening on the balcony, watching the sun set over the city that Dante had once controlled through fear and now sought to influence through legitimate means, a testament to the power of love and redemption. Sarah quizzed him on the Harbor District development while he helped her memorize medication dosages for her upcoming exam, a blending of their two worlds, a symphony of ambition and compassion. It was domestic, normal, exactly the kind of life Sarah had thought impossible 6 weeks ago, a testament to the transformative power of love and the unwavering belief in a better future. Do you miss it? Sarah asked as darkness fell, her voice soft with concern. The power, the fear, being the person everyone was afraid to cross. Dante was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the city lights below, his mind grappling with the ghosts of his past. Sometimes, when I'm in a meeting and someone pushes back, my first instinct is still to remind them who I am, what I'm capable of. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a raw honesty that laid bare his inner turmoil. But then I think about coming home to you, about building something that isn't dependent on violence, and I realize I don't miss it as much as I thought I would. What do you miss? She pressed gently, her hand reaching for his. The certainty. He admitted, his voice laced with a hint of nostalgia. When you rule through fear, everything is clear-cut. You know exactly where you stand, what your options are. His hand found hers, his fingers interlacing with hers in a gesture of comfort and support. This new way, legitimacy, legal battles, playing by society's rules, it's messier, slower, more uncertain, but worth it. He paused, his gaze locking with hers, his eyes filled with a love that transcended words. If it means I get to keep you, if it means I can build a life where our children don't inherit a legacy of violence and fear. Dante's smile was soft, filled with a hope he had never dared to dream of. Then yes, absolutely worth it. Sarah's breath caught, her heart swelling with a love that threatened to consume her. Children, she whispered, her eyes filled with wonder. Eventually, if you want them. His thumb traced circles on her palm, a gentle caress that sent shivers down her spine. I think about it sometimes. What our kids would be like if they'd have your courage and kindness. You would be. Sarah's voice was certain, filled with unwavering belief. If I could be the kind of father who teaches them to be strong without being cruel. He trailed off, his voice laced with a longing he could no longer suppress. You're already learning how to be strong in different ways. She reassured, her hand squeezing his. The next morning, Sarah did skip class to accompany Dante to his lawyer's office, a testament to her unwavering support and a symbol of their intertwined lives. She sat quietly in the corner while expensive attorneys in expensive suits discussed strategy for combating Russo's allegations, discovery motions, depositions, litigation timelines, a world away from her scrubs and stethoscopes. It was, as Dante had promised, monumentally boring, a tedious process of legal maneuvering and bureaucratic red tape, but it was also legitimate, legal, the kind of battle fought in courtrooms instead of back alleys, a stark contrast to the violence and intimidation that had once defined his life. Sarah caught Dante's eye across the conference room, and his expression softened, a silent acknowledgement of her presence, and a reminder of the reason he was enduring this arduous process. This was for her, his look said. All of this, the lawyers, the legitimate business, the slow extraction from his family's traditional operations, was because she'd made him want to be better, to build a life worthy of her love. When the meeting finally ended, Dante escorted her back to the penthouse, his hand resting protectively on the small of her back, a subtle gesture of ownership and love. That was excruciating, he said once they were alone, his voice laced with exasperation. But effective? She teased, her eyes twinkling with amusement. The lawyers think so. They're confident they can not only shut down Russo's accusations, but potentially pursue defamation charges. Dante pulled her into his arms, his embrace tight and reassuring. 6 months ago, I would have solved this problem in 3 hours with a phone call and implicit threats. Now it's going to take 6 months of legal maneuvering. Progress is rarely quick, she reminded him, her voice soft. No. His forehead rested against hers, his eyes filled with a love that transcended words. But it's the right kind of progress, the kind that doesn't compromise what we're building together. That night, as they lay tangled together in Dante's massive bed, Sarah felt a contentment she'd never experienced before, a sense of belonging and security that transcended the chaos and danger of their world. This was home, this complicated, dangerous, evolving relationship with a man who was trying to rewrite his entire life because she'd looked at him and seen potential for goodness, a testament to the power of love and redemption. I love you, she whispered into the darkness, her voice filled with a vulnerability she had once been afraid to show. I love you more. Dante's arms tightened around her, his grip possessive and reassuring. You saved me, Sarah, from becoming the kind of man my reputation suggested I already was. You saved yourself, she countered, her voice soft with love. I just gave you a reason to try. 2 weeks later, Sarah walked across the stage at her nursing school graduation, her red apron long since retired in favor of scrubs and a white coat, a symbol of her hard work and dedication. In the audience, Dante sat in the front row, his expression proud and fierce and completely transformed from the cold crime lord who'd yelled at her about Valentino's 6 months ago, a testament to the power of love and redemption. After the ceremony, he swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite the crowd of graduates and families, his joy overflowing. I'm so proud of you, he murmured against her hair, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for. Sarah struggled for words, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his love and support. For everything, the support, the space to focus on school, for being patient. I'd wait forever for you. Dante set her down, his hands framing her face, his eyes filled with a love that transcended words. But I'm hoping I won't have to wait much longer. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, Dante dropped to one knee right there in the graduation hall, oblivious to the crowd and the surprised gasps around them, pulling out a small velvet box that held a ring, an emerald surrounded by diamonds, vintage and elegant and perfect, a symbol of their timeless love. Sarah Mitchell. His voice carried across the suddenly silent hall, his words filled with a sincerity that touched everyone who heard them. 6 months ago, you looked me in the eye and refused to be intimidated. You saw past my reputation to the man underneath. You made me want to be better, to build something legitimate and good. You changed my entire world with 3 words. You don't own me. And you were right. I don't own you, but I'm hoping you'll choose to be mine anyway. Will you marry me? Sarah dropped to her knees in front of him, tears streaming down her face, her heart overflowing with a love she had never dared to dream of. Yes, God, yes. Dante slid the ring onto her finger, and the graduation hall erupted in applause, a collective celebration of their love and commitment. He kissed her like they were the only 2 people in the world, and Sarah kissed him back, tasting salt from their mingled tears, a symbol of the journey they had taken together and the promise of the future they would build. This was the man she'd chosen, the dangerous crime lord who was becoming something better, the feared Moretti heir who'd learned that true strength meant restraint, the lonely man who'd found someone brave enough to challenge him, to see his humanity beneath the monster everyone else saw. When they finally broke apart, Dante rested his forehead against hers, his voice filled with a reverence that mirrored her own. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life earning this," he promised. His eyes locked with hers. "Earning you. You already have." Sarah's voice was fierce, filled with unwavering belief. "Now we just get to build our future together." And as the crowd pressed in with congratulations and questions, as her classmates gaped at the ring and Dante's bodyguards managed the chaos with professional efficiency, Sarah realized that 6 months ago she'd walked into Valentino's expecting a normal shift serving tables. Instead, she'd found the love of her life in the last place she'd ever expected. In the dark eyes of a man everyone else feared who'd needed someone brave enough to see his humanity beneath the monster everyone else saw. 1 year later, Sarah stood in front of the floor-length mirror in her childhood bedroom, or rather the bedroom Dante had meticulously recreated based on her descriptions and the few photos she had from before her parents' deaths, a testament to his unwavering love and devotion. He'd wanted her to have a space that felt like home as she prepared for their wedding, a sanctuary of comfort and familiarity amidst the chaos of their lives. The dress was simple elegance, ivory silk that draped perfectly with delicate lace at the shoulders and a train that whispered across the hardwood floor, a timeless design that complemented her natural beauty. Her light brown hair was styled in soft waves, partially pinned up with small flowers woven through, a touch of whimsy amidst the classic elegance. The Moretti lion pendant rested against her skin, familiar and comforting, a symbol of her love and protection. "You look beautiful." Marco, her co-worker turned friend, stood in the doorway with tears in his eyes, his voice thick with emotion. "Like a princess who can handle herself around crime lords." But still, Sarah laughed, a light and joyful sound that filled the room. Former crime lord, mostly. It was true. Over the past year, Dante had systematically dismantled and rebuilt the Moretti empire into something almost entirely legitimate, a feat that had seemed impossible just a short time ago. The family still had influence, still commanded respect, but now it came from business acumen and strategic investments rather than fear and implicit threats, a testament to his transformation and the power of his vision. The transition hadn't been easy. Some of the old guard had resisted, preferring the traditional ways, clinging to the power and control that had defined their lives for so long. A few had left the organization entirely, unable to adapt to the new reality. But Dante had remained firm, supported by Sarah and a vision of what his family could become, a beacon of hope amidst the darkness. He now ran one of the city's most successful real estate development companies, with legitimate holdings across 3 states, a symbol of his success and the future he was building. The lawyers had successfully fought Marco Russo's allegations, and Russo himself was currently serving time for tax evasion, brought down by his own illegal activities, not Moretti retaliation, a testament to the power of justice and the consequences of one's actions. It was, Sarah reflected, exactly the kind of justice Dante had been learning to embrace, slow, legal, but ultimately effective, a far cry from the swift and brutal methods of his past. "The car is ready whenever you are," Marco said, his voice bringing her back to the present. "Though I should warn you, there are about 200 people downstairs waiting to see you." Sarah's stomach fluttered, a mixture of excitement and nervousness swirling within her. The guest list had been a negotiation, a delicate balance between Dante's old world and her new one. Old family associates who needed to witness that the Moretti heir was truly settling down, signaling a shift in power and a commitment to a new era. Sarah's nursing school friends who were still slightly terrified of Dante, a testament to the lingering fear that surrounded his name, and a mix of business colleagues from Dante's legitimate enterprises, a symbol of his success and the new world he was building. "How does he look?" Sarah couldn't help asking, her curiosity piqued. Marco grinned, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Like a man who can't believe his luck. He's been pacing for the last hour, checking his watch every 30 seconds. Sarah gathered her bouquet, white roses and delicate greenery, a symbol of purity and new beginnings, and took a deep breath, steeling herself for the moment that would change everything. This was it, the moment that made everything official, that declared to both Dante's world and hers that they were choosing this impossible love despite all the obstacles, a testament to their courage and unwavering belief in each other. The venue was the same upscale restaurant where they'd met, Valentino's, a full-circle moment in their extraordinary love story. Antonio had insisted, saying it would be an honor to host the wedding of the man who'd become one of their most loyal patrons and the fearless waitress who'd changed his life, a gesture of gratitude and respect. The corner booth, where they'd had their first confrontation, had been removed to create space for the ceremony, a symbolic act of removing the old to make room for the new, a testament to their growth and transformation. Sarah appreciated the symbolism, the recognition that their love had required them to let go of the past and embrace the future. As she walked down the makeshift aisle between rows of chairs, past faces both familiar and intimidating, Sarah's eyes searched for Dante, her heart pounding in her chest. She found him at the front, waiting for her, his presence radiating strength and love. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his dark hair styled back, his expression a mix of awe and fierce possessiveness that made her breath catch, a testament to his love and devotion. But when she reached him and he took her hands, his touch sending a shiver down her spine, Sarah saw something else in his eyes. Vulnerability, a flicker of doubt that even now, he couldn't quite believe she'd chosen him, a testament to the depth of his love and the sacrifices he had made. "You're stunning," he whispered as the officiant began, his voice barely audible above the murmur of the crowd. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she retorted, a playful glint in her eyes, her voice filled with love. The ceremony was traditional, their vows a mix of standard promises and personal additions, a testament to their unique love story and the commitment they were making to each other. When it came time for Dante's vows, his voice, though steady, trembled with a palpable emotion. "Sarah," he began, "a year and a half ago, you looked right into my eyes and refused to be intimidated. You saw something in me, something I had completely forgotten even existed. You saw the potential for goodness, for real change, for becoming something more than just my worst impulses. You challenged me, pushed me to actually be a better man. And then, you stood right beside me, unwavering, while I struggled to even figure out what that better was supposed to look like." His hands tightened, just slightly on hers, a silent promise. "I promise to spend every single day of my life earning your love. I promise to consciously choose restraint over impulsive reaction, to choose legitimacy over the easy road of expedience, and to choose us, our relationship, our future, over absolutely everything else. You are my salvation, you are my conscience, and you are, without a doubt, my greatest blessing. I will protect you, cherish you, and love you with every fiber of my being, until my very last breath leaves my body." Sarah's vows were simpler, perhaps, but they carried no less weight, no less sincerity. "Dante," she said, her voice equally full of emotion, "you taught me that courage isn't about the absence of fear. It's about consciously choosing to move forward, to keep going, even when you're terrified. You showed me that people can change, that true redemption is genuinely possible, and that love has the extraordinary power to transform even the darkest, most seemingly hopeless situations into something breathtakingly beautiful. I choose you, all of you, every single day, for the rest of our lives together." When the officiant, with a warm smile, pronounced them officially married, Dante kissed her with a gentleness that completely belied his powerful and, let's be honest, terrifying reputation. The entire restaurant erupted in spontaneous applause, a joyous cacophony of celebration. Old family associates, men who'd known Dante for decades, sat shoulder to shoulder with Sarah's friends from nursing school, two completely different worlds colliding in a beautiful, celebratory mess. The reception itself was a perfect study in contrasts, a delightful blend of their two separate lives. Traditional Italian music mixed seamlessly with contemporary hits, creating a vibrant and eclectic soundtrack to their celebration. Expensive champagne flowed freely right alongside locally brewed craft beer, catering to every taste. Even Dante's bodyguards, ever present despite the relaxed atmosphere, chatted amiably with Sarah's former professors, finding common ground and sharing stories. During their first dance as husband and wife, Dante pulled Sarah close, his hand gently spanning the small of her back. "How are you holding up?" he murmured softly against her hair, his breath warm against her skin. "Surreal," she admitted, tilting her head back to look at him. Good surreal though, right? He pressed, a hint of concern in his voice. Absolutely. The best kind of surreal. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes shining with happiness. A year and a half ago, I was literally serving you drinks and secretly plotting my escape from your table. And now we're married. It's the best decision I have ever made. Though, she added, a playful glint in her eyes. Being rude about that veil was definitely the worst decision. It definitely made me think you were just a spoiled, entitled jerk. I was an entitled jerk, Dante readily admitted, his smile self-deprecating. I just hid it better than most people, especially with everyone else. He paused, his eyes filled with genuine affection. And now I'm your entitled jerk exclusively. Sarah laughed, the sound light and joyful, and Dante spun her across the dance floor with practiced ease, their bodies moving together in perfect harmony. When the song ended, Antonio, the restaurant's owner, approached them with a bottle of wine. It was the very same vintage that Dante had been drinking the night they first met, a subtle nod to their unconventional beginning. Compliments of the house, Antonio said, his eyes misting over with emotion. I honestly never thought I'd live to see the day when the fearsome Mr. Moretti looked this genuinely happy. Neither did I, Dante admitted with a chuckle, pulling Sarah even closer against his side. But she has a way of making impossible things seem not only possible, but actually achievable. The party continued late into the night, fueled by love, laughter, and copious amounts of wine. Sarah's feet ached from all the dancing. Her face hurt from smiling so much, and she genuinely never felt happier in her entire life. As the evening began to wind down, Dante, ever the attentive husband, whisked her away to the penthouse apartment, now officially their shared home. Sarah, ever practical, had insisted on keeping some of her old, familiar furniture mixed in with his ridiculously expensive pieces, creating a space that felt both luxurious and genuinely comfortable. Finally alone, Dante sighed contentedly, loosening his tie as they stepped into the private elevator. Not that I didn't absolutely love the party, he added quickly, seeing the playful skepticism in her eyes. But I've been wanting to get you alone all day, ever since the moment I first saw you walking down that aisle in that dress. His eyes darkened with a familiar heat. Do you even know how incredibly difficult it was to maintain any semblance of composure during the entire ceremony? All I could think about was this very moment, finally being alone with you. The elevator doors opened silently, revealing their opulent penthouse, and without another word, Dante swept Sarah into his arms, carrying her across the threshold despite her laughing protests. This is so incredibly cliché, she giggled, clinging to his neck. Just let me have my moment, he retorted playfully, his eyes twinkling with amusement. He carried her gently into their bedroom, setting her down softly on her feet, his hands framing her face. Sarah Moretti, my wife, he murmured, savoring the sound of her new name. Dante Moretti, my husband, she replied, equally delighted. She savored the words, testing them on her tongue. We really did this, didn't we? Built something real, something lasting, from that disastrous first meeting. The best disaster of my entire life. Dante agreed, his voice thick with emotion. He kissed her softly, tenderly. Thank you for seeing past the reputation, for giving me a chance to actually be better. Thank you for being brave enough to change, too. Sarah's fingers traced the strong line of his jaw. Thank you, she whispered, for choosing us, for choosing me, over everything else. They made love that night with a tenderness and passion that only came from truly knowing each other. Not just physically, but emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. Every scar, every fear, every secret dream laid bare between them, offered and accepted with unconditional love and unwavering support. Afterwards, wrapped securely in each other's arms as the glittering city lights twinkled far below, Sarah felt a sense of contentment, a profound sense of belonging, that she'd never even dared to imagine was possible. What are you thinking? Dante's voice was drowsy, his hand tracing lazy, comforting patterns on her shoulder. That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, she murmured, snuggling closer to him. That we found each other against all impossible odds. That our entire story started with me being brave for literally 30 seconds, and it changed absolutely everything. 3 words, Dante murmured sleepily. You don't own me. Best 3 words ever spoken to me. Sarah chuckled softly. I love you are pretty good too, though. Yeah, he agreed, his arms tightening protectively around her. Those are even better. They fell asleep like that, Sarah's head resting comfortably on Dante's chest, his heartbeat a steady, reassuring rhythm beneath her ear. Outside, security guards maintained their vigilant posts, ensuring their safety and privacy. The legitimate empire Dante was building required constant management, and the world, as always, continued turning. But inside their penthouse, 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely, most improbable of circumstances slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they had consciously chosen each other, against all odds and against all expectations. 5 years later, Sarah would be standing in the pediatric oncology ward of Children's Memorial Hospital, holding the trembling hand of a scared 6-year-old starting chemotherapy. She'd be wearing scrubs instead of her old red apron, a simple wedding ring instead of constant nervousness, and her discreet security detail would wait patiently and respectfully in the hallway. Dante would text her throughout the day, sometimes about crucial business decisions, sometimes just to tell her that he missed her terribly, always signing off with the same 3 words, I love you. They'd have a daughter by then, a vibrant, energetic 3-year-old with her mother's light brown hair and her father's piercing dark eyes. A daughter who would grow up knowing about her father's past, but seeing primarily his present, the man he had become. The man who ran legitimate businesses, donated generously to children's hospitals, and taught her, above all else, that true strength meant protecting the vulnerable, not exploiting them for personal gain. But on their wedding night, none of that was certain yet. All they had was each other, their seemingly impossible love, and the unwavering commitment to build a life together that was worthy of the profound transformation they had both undergone. Sarah drifted off to sleep, her mind still replaying the 3 simple words that had started everything. 3 words that had made a feared crime lord stop, reconsider his entire life, and ultimately choose a different path. 3 words that had given her the courage to stand her ground when every logical instinct told her to run as far away as possible. You don't own me. But somewhere along the winding, unpredictable path of falling deeply and irrevocably in love, they had both learned that ownership was never the point. Partnership was. Choosing each other, consciously and deliberately, every single day, despite the inevitable complications, despite the inherent risks, and despite the constant transformation required from both of them. And as the city slept and the first hints of dawn prepared to paint the sky with vibrant colors, Sarah Mitchell Moretti smiled contentedly against her husband's chest, profoundly grateful for every single moment, every single decision, every single twist of fate that had led her to this one perfect moment. From a struggling waitress who refused to back down to the devoted wife of a reformed crime lord. From 3 defiant words of rebellion to a lifetime of unconditional love. It was, she reflected with a quiet smile, exactly the kind of impossible, over-the-top story she would have laughed at just 18 months ago. But now it was her reality, her beautiful, complicated, messy, and undeniably hard-won reality. And she wouldn't change a single solitary moment of it.